there was a hedge on the boundary of my school, right by the playground. And I know exactly where there was a little entryway there. You went down into the earth, because I do feel like behind me there was I think there was a fire or something lit up, but there weren't like lights. So like there were beings, it was almost like there were gradient steps, like an amphitheater almost, but small. And there were beings like sitting. I really think it's becoming more and more important that people are nurturing that reality, that they are a spirit. We have this deprivation in our modern living across the board. It's still, a lot of people don't have exposure to that reality, that they are a spirit. They have a body, but they are a spirit, and that's the truth of who they are. And I think that's going to be so critical for navigating the changes that we're in and that are coming.
Our healthcare system.
Today on Cosmic Convergence, we're joined by Kara Goodwin, host of the Soul Elevation podcast, ranked in the top 2% globally, and author of Your Authentic Awakening. Kara helps people reconnect with their spiritual nature, clear energetic blocks, and live with more clarity, purpose, and fulfillment. Today, we're exploring mystical experiences, multidimensional awareness, and how these experiences might connect to non-human intelligence. If you enjoy conversations like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Welcome, Kara. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to join you guys today.
Yeah, like we were saying beforehand, we were extremely flattered when you reached out to us after listening to one of our episodes, to the point where I was like, what did we say in that episode? Normally, we're the ones always reaching out to people. So to have someone actually reach out to us was really nice. So thank you.
Well, you guys are doing great work, and I'm loving diving in and learning from the experiences that you're exploring. This is really important work. Like we were talking right before we started recording, that we need to be talking about this, and we need to have open spaces where we can get into the things that for so long have not been necessarily safe things to talk about or popular things to talk about.
Yeah. And it's definitely that awareness that's going on, because I've talked to a lot of people, and some people I'm coming to find just get it. It's weird. It's like you meet strangers and they're like, wow, they're totally where I'm at right now, and they have the same mindset and stuff, and they understand. And that's after you reached out to us, we started to watch some of your podcasts. I'm like, yeah, she gets it. And it's just weird. And then there's some people that don't, and it's okay. Everybody in their own time. But for people that don't know you, how did this journey begin for you? Like, what got you into all this? Were you always a believer, or did you have your own personal experiences?
So I was a believer as a child. I was really drawn to it. I remember there were you'd go to the library, the school library, and I would like to look for like the weird books, the ones that are talking, like Loch Ness.
Yeah.
And there were alien books and things like that. And I just was drawn to that topic. I remember there would be these Time Life commercials they would have like series of books, and they'd have these like paranormal and alien phenomenon books.
Yeah.
I really did believe in them. I was fascinated by by Egypt. I remember being in 7th grade social studies class, or maybe it was 6th grade, and we had a unit on the Great Pyramids, and I was so fascinated by it, and I did not like social studies class. So it was something that was unusual for me, where I was like, oh my gosh, I can't get enough, and this is a textbook that I'm reading. And of course, they're telling it from a very, watered down version. But I was so like, there's so much they don't know. And even in a textbook, they're talking about how they don't know a lot about it. But then as I got older, I felt that I grew out of it, let's say. I actually lived in England in my 20s. And I think that was really a time where the people that I was around, I had some great friends there, and I loved living there. But they just weren't really interested in that type of thing. I think there was just a cultural thing too, where it was I just felt like I did change a lot while I was there, just adapting to a different culture. And that is kind of when I pinpoint to where I stopped believing. And again, I felt like I kind of grew out of these things that I had been like as a child, but I was shedding a lot of things as an expat, and a lot of habits that I had as an American. And there was just a lot of changing happening at that time. And I think a lot of people go through a lot of changes in their 20s as you're kind of figuring out who you are or who you think you are. So then I went through a spiritual awakening in my late 30s. And that was due to a series of tragedies that happened in a very short period of time with people within our family and my in-laws, within like the immediate family who were dying or undergoing serious surgeries, heart transplant, serious accidents, getting hit by a motorbike as they crossed the street type of thing. Our dog died. All of this in 7 months. A very dear friend who'd been a groomsman in our wedding was diagnosed with a brain tumor. He passed away the following year. So all of this was happening, and we were living abroad. At that time, we were living in Italy. And so all of that was happening. We couldn't really easily be with everybody as we're undergoing this grief and all of these scary changes. And that led me to learning meditation, really kind of as a Hail Mary or throwing spaghetti on the wall, of like, okay, I'm like scared all the time right now. And I'm scared when my phone rings. So I learned meditation, and I kept it pretty secular in the beginning. And it was through organic experiences that were happening in my meditative state where I started to kind of open up to like, okay, maybe there is kind of a supernatural element to some things that are happening here that, are not physical, but I'm like perceiving light, or I'm feeling my consciousness lifting up and like kind of perching on a platform, or, just different things like that. That was kind of my soft entry. So I was very focused on meditation for a while, and still not even knowing that like NHIs were part of at least like extraterrestrials. I mean, I started to get into like angels and spirit guides and things like that, but it took me a while to even realize that there was an ET element to spirituality. I always thought that was like a sci-fi thing, or, I was a child in the 80s, and there was a huge boom, at least in America, of the ET phenomenon. People reporting abductions, and the stories were terrifying. So I really thought that it was a scary thing for a long time. But one of the early meditation experiences that I had, one of the early visions that I had, was that it was as though I was witnessing a spiraling galaxy from very far away. So in this blank space behind my closed eyes, something started to come into focus, and it was this spiraling, rotating galaxy was the only frame of reference I had for what I was seeing. And I was like, well, that's weird. Why would I see that in meditation? Again, no frame of reference at that time. And it took a few years really before I started hearing more about ETs being part of a spiritual evolution, and then starting to have some experiences that made me question whether I was having some sort of experiences. And so I have not, as far as I know, I don't think that I have been abducted at any point. There is this memory that has come back in the last, like very recently, actually, and I'm still kind of coming to terms with it, because I was between 4 and 7 years old because of where I lived. I know that it was between those ages. And I had a dream that I went underground, and I know exactly where I entered because there was a hedge on the boundary of my school, right by the playground. And I know exactly where there was a little entryway there. You went down into the earth, and then there was like some sort of natural light in there, like almost like there was a fire going or something. And there were other beings there. I can't remember. I don't think they were all human. And
Would you say the light is atmospheric?
that's a good way to say it, because I do feel like behind me there was I think there was a fire or something. It was lit up, but there weren't like lights. So that I love that, an atmospheric light. That's a great way to say it. And
It's just interesting because they say that a lot of abductees mention the atmospheric light.
okay, I have heard that about ships
Yeah.
now that you're saying that. And I felt that I was inside the earth, which all of it was, I was walking past, like there were beings. It was almost like there were gradient steps, like an
Mhm.
amphitheater almost, but small. And there were beings like sitting and I was walking past beings that were sitting there, and I can't remember much more about it, but I remember that when I went to school the next day or whatever, if it was Monday, I can't remember if it was a couple days later or whatever, but I went to that spot in the hedge to see the entry. And I was like, hey, where did it go? I couldn't find the opening that had been there. There had been like a little opening, or maybe like the brush had set, like moved aside or something. I don't know. But it was such a vivid dream that I couldn't tell the difference. Like, in my waking time as a child, I literally thought that it had happened. And so, and this dream has stuck with me for 40 years. I recently started questioning the quote unquote dream of that, where I was like, I was so sure that I'd been there and I could pinpoint the spot of where I'd gone in. And I still remember this dream all these years later. So it's all subjective, right? Like, I can't say for sure that that was an encounter, but it just has some markers of some weird things. And that's kind of been my experience even since I started opening up to, like, something weird is happening here. It's not been the type of thing where I am like, I am 100% sure that I was on a ship, or
Right.
but weird things were happening. I've had, like, experiences in my body where I have felt like there is some sort of equipment that I can't see. I know I'm in my bed. Usually I know I'm in my bed because this is happening in that hypnagogic state
Hmm.
where I'm not asleep yet. I know it's not a dream, but I'm also, like, seeing things that I don't see in my regular waking time. But, one example of just an experience I've had several times that I question, like, what is going on with that, is feeling like parts of my body vibrate. And usually it's aligned with the chakras. And it's not just like the chakra point, it's like a whole band of my body. So it's like a whole, like, width. It's the whole width of my body, but expanded from the chakra point. And there are times where I can even perceive the bed, behind me vibrating, and it will be aligned with one particular chakra point, and then it will move and there'll be a different one, but I can feel the physical vibrations, and it's almost as though there is something hovering above me, like stimulating a chakra point for several minutes, and then before I know it, it's not doing it anymore, but another part is doing it. So that's things like that, and then some inner visions and things are all like, okay, this is unusual.
Yeah, I was curious when you said that because I haven't finished your book, but I'm almost halfway done. When you mentioned it, I was like, oh, that's very curious because I've experienced waking up out of like a weird dream and my body was physically vibrating, like violently.
Mhm.
And it scared me at the time. And this was prior to me knowing and learning about this stuff. So, like, your mind goes to a scary place. I was like, was I being possessed? What was that? Because it
Yeah.
was real apparently, but I didn't know what exactly was happening. So it's like your mind is trying to figure out what that could be. And then at the time I was like possession, but then now I'm like, oh, energetically something could have been happening and it was just my fear that I was running with. So it's
Yeah.
interesting to hear other people have similar experiences like that.
Right.
Yeah, I've also had experiences of feeling my whole body shake. Sometimes
Mhm.
from coming awake. It's not happened in a long time, but I do remember. I don't think I've ever told you, Christian. Like years and years ago, like I had like random times where I'd wake up and I'm like, is the bed vibrating or like what's going on? Like it's a
Mhm.
weird like subtle
Yes.
sense. The other thing too is when I had a channeling experience. I've mentioned many times on the show, but pretty much I had a pull to make contact with them, and this was after I had an experience of being my soul taken out of my body to a ship and then being put on a table with grays. And this was a few weeks after, but pretty much what happened was I meditated, put myself in an altered state, and then I could feel that the room, like the atmosphere, like shifted. Like it's
Mm.
like I'm sure we all know that feeling, like where it's like you're not, everything's not fully grounded, and I could feel them swimming around my psyche, and then they went into my body, and then I could feel the energy go up into my throat, and I was then not driving my body, and they started speaking through me. John, the other co-host, he actually sensed this. He had told me hours later he was dreaming, and he could sense me, and that there was light beings in me, and like I was shaking and stuff, but I was fully shaking, vibrating. And then after that experience, my partner, she took notes down of what I said because I was not driving my body. And then I felt like there was something deposited in me, like information that I don't have access to, but it's there, and it's there now. I can sense it. The other thing too, Kara, I wanted to say, just going back to your childhood, the underground location with the beans, that also comes up with, are you familiar with Jacques Vallée, the UFO researcher?
I don't think so.
Okay. So Jacques Vallée is essentially the grandfather when it comes to UFOlogy, and he knows everything when it comes to it. He was
He's
actually
not the Australian guy, right? That was
no,
taken for like 4
He's
days.
French.
he's
He's
French.
French, but there's a French guy who lived in Australia on a farm, and then he was taken up, and it sounds like a different person.
Different, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but he's done extensive research into the phenomenon. He was the one who came out with Passport to Mongolia back in the 70s. And that really changed the topic on UFOs, that they were from, because everyone was talking about them being extraterrestrial. He was saying no, for how they come across historically, they're interdimensional, or they could be cryptoterrestrial. And so that was kind of the angle that he came at it with. But he mentions a lot of cases. There's a recent book I just finished called Dimensions by him. It was fantastic. And he goes through all the different connections of the Fae, the mythology of the Fae, or fairy folk, the good people, and how they have connection with like the Greys, or the phenomenon in general, missing time, people being gone for extended lengths and then coming back, and they're different. Also, people going to locations that seem like almost like they're underground. They have lights that don't come from anywhere, but it's all bright. And there was this particular case that reminds me of, there was a gentleman that he mentions in the book during the 1940s. He was taken by, he described them as gnome-looking beings, and they brought him down into this. It had stairs. He went down into this cavern area. There was no visible lights, but it was all lit up. And then they brought him to a center console, and it was very esoteric, and in the way that they were trying to get him to kind of initiation, a ritual almost. But yeah, one of the key components was no lights that were visible, but everything's bright. And that is 100% how it is with the contactee abductee phenomenon. So Jacques Vallée goes into the theory that they shift and change as society moves forward. So you can have them looking like beings that farmers and, people that are interacting with they live in the forest, the fairy element, but they're also tricksters, right? And I think that lends the case to the phenomenon in general. And so, yeah, he just describes a lot of those things. But when you were in that space, so you said it's a dream that stick with you for 40 years. That's not a dream. That's called, like we used to say, it's a dream that's not a dream. So it sticks
That's
with
what
you.
I'm wondering. Yeah.
Yeah. What was the general sense when you were down there with them? Did you feel like they were connected with you? Did you feel like that they were just kind of these beings that you're like, who are these people? What was kind of the general sense, if you can remember that?
Yeah, I can't remember if it seemed like I knew them. I do remember somebody who was bigger than me was kind of escorting me.
On your right or left side?
I feel like it was on my left, but because I'm just trying to kind of put myself back in there now, and the left is what comes up. And I get the sense that it doesn't seem like a regular human. It seems like it's something else, but I don't have a really clear memory of it. I just remember there being I think there were 3 or 4 maybe tiers, and people just kind of sitting there on these stone. They were like a stone natural tier type of thing.
Right?
Pardon me?
It was like an amphitheater, you said?
Well, that's kind of the sense of where it's like the levels, But it was only I think there were only 3 or 4 levels, and they kind of went around. But I can't remember a lot past just walking past, beings, people, however, it showed up. I can't remember what happened from there. Yeah, but I appreciate those insights because that is new for me. And again, it's like I was telling you, it's something that I've never forgotten the dream, but it's come up recently where I was like, isn't it weird that I've never forgotten? I kind of just always think it's weird that I remember this dream, but never went any deeper than that of like, maybe it wasn't a dream. Like maybe you really did go in the ground because I remember just being so confused when I was at the playground and I was looking for the entryway and I was like,
Expecting it to be there, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it was so real. And then I was like, was it a dream? Did that not happen? And then I was left with nothing else where I was like, I guess it was a dream. It had to have been a dream because this entry's not here now.
Yeah.
But I was kind of shocked. Like, it was like, well, it's not here. I can see with my own eyes it's not here. So what else? What is the explanation? But
Yeah.
it
Have you ever brought
surprised
it
even
up?
me at that time.
Have you ever brought it up under hypnotherapy or anything like that?
No, I've had a QHHT session once and I didn't even enter my awareness to ask about it.
Mm,
And my experience with QHHT is at this point, it's been probably 2 years, or maybe it was last year. Maybe it's been like 18 months. I loved it. And I felt this energy shift and I had like bonkers dreams the night that it happened that were like, whoa, there's a lot going on. And they were like verified in real time of like contacting the people who were in it. And they're like, oh my God, that's so poignant for me. But I had and this is really common, but I just felt like I was grasping at straws as I was under, even though I know I was under, but I know so much now about the phenomenon. I
right,
know so much intellectually about the nature of consciousness, and I've had so many of my own experiences now, and I have my theories about what my experiences are,
right.
and so I feel that like when I rely on the information that came through for me personally, where I was just like, maybe I was right, maybe I was accurate, but there's this like, just say the first thing, trust the first thing that comes. And it's like some of the stuff I couldn't even explain I was like, I don't even know how to explain what I'm seeing. Like it's so weird. Like it doesn't make sense to me. I've got this it's like I'm holding this helmet. I don't know, but it's not. It's on a stick. I
Okay.
have no idea what I'm looking at. I don't know what I'm supposed to say, but
That's okay. I was just super curious because like I've always wondered like if anything would come out of my sessions or like what would exactly happen. So it's nice to hear it from someone who's gone through it, you
yeah.
know.
And
But
don't limit yourself based on my
oh
experience.
no, like I'm still curious. I just sometimes I wonder like if I will like if it'll work or like,
Yeah.
but at the same time I know it's been helpful for some people and but at the very least we live in some interesting times because we're talking about, other beings and stuff like coming from other worlds and now, we just had a UFO hearing couple days ago, and there's just more witnesses, more like high-ranking people telling you that things have happened to them personally, and they've seen those things. And I've mentioned this before, like Congresswoman Paula Luna just mentioning interdimensional beings on television. Like it's weirdly validating, isn't it? Like it's starting to like connect everything, and I think that eventually this is going to be normal. Like it's like, oh yeah, of course, that's what it is. But it's always, having that breakthrough. I feel like if you look back at history, looking at all the people they used to call crazy and ended up being right, and then we ended up evolving from that. And now we have planes in the sky. And, when that
Right.
was considered ridiculous, back in the day. But I feel like it's just another thing that will eventually become normal.
Yeah, I think we're going through such rapid change across humanity on that front of whether it be ETs, UFOs, whether it be the Atlas,
Three-eyed atlas.
three-eye Atlas. I was like, three
Yeah.
Atlas? Three-eye Atlas, whether it be even just people starting to wake up to what is happening politically in terms of like things that we all bought into for a long
Right.
time, and we see these things, these plays that have worked, the playbook that has worked for so long and that we haven't questioned and we've just taken things at face value. And the amount of people that I see who are like, actually, no, I don't buy this anymore. And so all of that, and I feel like it's just happening so fast.
Yep.
there is a convergence. There's a cosmic convergence where there's like a lot of different pieces of what we understand reality to be are coming together at once. And I think that's part of our evolution. That's part of the increase of our human intelligence. Daniel, you were talking about download that came in that's like still waiting to be unlocked, to be unwrapped, whatever it is. But I feel like, a lot of people are having downloads. We've got a lot of people whose consciousness is expanding very rapidly. It's kind of like a lot of people going through these sort of personal stargates where it's like, okay, I understood things to be like this. And then in a very short time, I now understand things to be like this. And I see how a lot of things are connected. So there is this convergence of like, yep, we've got the Congress stuff. We've got, there's a lot happening very fast from a disclosure, like official government disclosure, which I honestly, I don't know how much to trust that to.
We
My
talk about that
flags
all the
go up
time.
for, yeah, I had maybe like 2 or 3 years ago that's kind of when there must have been, I don't keep up with the news intentionally. And there was some big news 2 or 3 years ago about somebody says that they admit, and it was some government agency. It wasn't the New York Times thing from longer ago. That was like 2018 or something. This was like just 2 or 3 years ago. And I
David
remember
Grush,
pardon me?
probably David Grush, maybe. That's when it
Maybe.
it became more of a big deal, like all of a sudden.
Right. And
But that's the only one I can think of.
it might have been. Yeah. I just know that it was like, apparently it was in the news now. And my son who was not a believer, and kind of, would tease me sometimes about my interest in it. He was like, "Hey, did you see that it was in the news that like they're admitting things now?" And I'm like, "Really?" And he's like, "What do you think about that?" I'm like, "Well, I mean, doesn't really change anything for me. Like, you guys can catch up."
Yeah, that's what I say. I mean, it's going to happen. I know that there are people that are going to wake up at their own time. And some people they just need something like the news to kind of like tell them it's real,
Yeah.
because they're just very held to physical, I guess, or what else would you
Well, they
call that? Like,
trust,
yeah,
right? I mean, I was like that for a long time. I
right.
trusted the narrative. I trusted the authorities. I didn't know not to, right? And
Yeah.
then start to peel the onion a little bit and it's like, what are all these maggots in here?
Yeah. It could be scary for some too, because I talked to
Yeah.
someone who, one time I asked her, like, isn't the universe amazing? It wasn't even a crazy conversation. I was just saying it's so big and there's so much out there. And she was like, honestly, I don't want to think about it. And I was surprised. I was like, really? And she's like, no, like, it's just too much. And
Yeah.
then, and I was like, oh, yeah, I guess, everyone's at their own awareness level. You know what I mean? And that's how it is for some people.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of people too. Everything is in the news, the amount of information that we know of what's going on in the world events right now is exhausting to say the least. So for people to be questioning these things in their personal life, I think can be a really, really a lot for some people. It's trying to be patient with and, not oversharing because I run into that myself with coworkers or others. Yeah, it's been a really interesting few years though, especially with Grush when he came out, because it was really around that time that I started having my really intense experiences and stuff, and so I think it was a part of a shift, And Kara, you mentioned a little bit briefly about not fully trusting this process of like what's actually going on here, and I think both can exist, right? You can have the NHI that are like, I understand and know that there are people in these programs that are experiencers that are connected with them. They've been lifelong experiencers. They're probably stuck in these programs, right? So you do have genuine people trying to get the information out, but then you also have people, billionaires or others, that are backing certain voices or in the space and trying to take over the conversation. So I think it's important to kind of see where the conversation is going, and also just to be aware that opportunists will take advantage of however they can. And so I think that's not been anything new in the UFO or disclosure space, going back even back to Roswell, of there being people trying to take advantage. Our government's using private companies to back engineer stuff, there's always an incentive to take advantage technologically wise, and also how can these people get a foothold versus their enemies, or just having more controls. It's an interesting time right now, to say the
Absolutely.
least, with it. And I think also, as of recent events, conversations tend to lean either, they're very binary right now. So it's like, are you with Grush and disclosure? Are you not with Grush or disclosure, right? There's this black and white thinking that a lot of people, that's online discourse now. And it's really hard to be subtle and nuanced, because it's really how things work in reality, is things are nuanced. But yeah, like, I think that my personal opinion is that things will continue to progress. I think that they are very aware of how this disclosure of them rolls out. Even if the government comes out and talks about them, they are still in charge of disclosure. Government can come out with whatever they want, but they ultimately control that rollout. And so, yeah, I think that is why it's so important for all of us to be here today talking about it, talking about our personal experiences, because people's interactions with the phenomenon is personal. It really is. People talk to Chris Bledsoe, he's very prominent, and a lot of people talk about Chris. And the guy who, in his book, that gave him the piece of metal and he held and it like affected him, who was, the dude has, whatever credentials, he can walk into any room. That gentleman, Chris asked him, why are you guys investigating me? And he says, they don't like to interact with us, but they're interacting with you. So why are you so special, right? So I think the government really, they're trying to understand what's going on. You have these black programs that are trying to understand what's going on. They probably know a little bit better, but also the beings are interdimensional, outside of time and space. How are you going to get in a box? Like, let's be real here. It's
Yeah.
going to come out either way.
Right. Yeah. There's something that you were mentioning, is the subtle aspects and the subjectiveness of it, right? Chris Bledsoe has some incredible experiences, and he's got that external validation with a lot of what he has. I mean, like the lady in white and things like that's subjective, but exciting if that comes, that Easter, when Regulus rises between the Sphinx's paws in 2026, that whole, do you guys know what I'm talking about with
Yeah,
that
I read it
prediction?
right
Yeah.
before I read that part in his book. I had made a short on TikTok about interesting findings of multiple people mentioning this time frame. And
Really?
it's just like, not to say that I believe the time frame and something is going to happen, because I don't know, but I thought it was just very peculiar. You had like a former member of the CIA mentioning it. Then you had a famous channeler mentioning it. And then you had also Greer mentioning the same date. And I'm like, where are all these people getting these dates from? And then that same night, I'm reading Chris Bledsoe's book, and then it mentions that same time frame. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And
Oh my gosh.
I was like, I would have
Yeah.
put that in the video too if I would have known, but it is
Right.
interesting.
And it's
I don't
interesting
know.
that it was on your personal radar,
Yeah.
just the synchronicities, like and then you come across that in a book. I love when things like that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it made me wonder. I was like, well, is this really important?
Yeah.
And I did mention this before in the past, but I did a dowsing rod session, and my girlfriend had never seen anything like that before, and she started recording, and we were asking all kinds of questions. And I asked about that time frame. I was like, "Is there an actual thing to that?" And whoever I was communicating with said yes. So I was like, "Okay, that's interesting." And we
Yeah.
recorded it,
Yeah.
and we asked all kinds of questions, eventually leading to it being my grandmother, which was very interesting.
Well, I'm excited to see what happens, and the subjectivity of all of that, with the experiences. And I know you guys have had this too. We were talking about the vibrations in the body, and there's no way for somebody to feel the way that I felt unless they felt it too. Right. So
Right.
I can explain myself, but it's still got the subjective element of it, of me. I talk about that dream that I had, and how it's like, I don't have any other dreams like that that were so strong at the time that they were happening, that I, was confused in my regular waking life and then can still go into that dream 40 years later, but it's still like my interpretation, right? And I'm still figuring that out. But I think there's something unusual about that. But there's no objectivity with a lot of this because it relies on the experiencer. And our language is so limited, right? And not everybody can kind of convey through words as easily as a poet might be able to. But a lot of the things that I've had, you could explain it from a lot of different perspectives, right? And in fact, that openness and that willingness to look from different perspectives at something that we've had, I think is critical. That's an opportunity that we have to not get boxed into things are this way, or it means this, or it was this. Going back to QHHT, there are people who regress people in QHHT, and they regress and they have an experience. And these are people, sometimes they're experiencers who have had traumatic experiences. Like they remember what happened, but it was traumatic. They feel that they were taken, they feel that they were violated, and it's heartbreaking. But then they experience it through hypnosis and they get more information about what was actually happening, and they see, oh, they actually healed me. But I had this perspective that it was all against my will because I didn't choose it, but they were actually doing it to help me. And so it can help to change their perspective. And I know in one of my inner journeys, because I've had, like I say, I never, sometimes I think I had a dream screen. I had like, not necessarily always that those feel like they're on ships, but that they're in the astral. I feel like real, like astral things have happened, but I have a dream screen and like it kind of creates this whole like earthly scenario of it. But I'm like, that felt weird. I feel weird now. I think something more was happening. But what I remember is this dream, but it doesn't really feel like a dream. But and I like to call those dream screens. And then I have a lot of dreams where I'm like on a cruise ship. And to me now, I'm like, okay, I feel like when I'm on a cruise ship, I'm on a ship, but that's like what my brain does with it
Your brain's
to,
filling the space. Yeah.
yeah.
There's a channeler who was talking about that, and he says sometimes he's like your brain, you will experience things sometimes in other dimensions, he says, that you don't know how to really translate. And so your brain will just be like, you were on a school bus,
Yep.
you
Yeah.
know, which is
Yeah.
really interesting. So it's funny that you're saying that.
Yeah, and I have gone on cruises before, so it's not like I don't have
Mm,
any experience with cruises, but I don't go on them, like, every week or every
right.
month, like, and it's such a, like, repetitive place that I find myself in my dreams. Compared to my regular life, I'm like, there's a disproportionate amount of time I spend on cruise ships in my dreams. It just makes me wonder. But, I one like metaphysical experience, quantum experience, like a hypnagogic state again where I'm not asleep but I'm seeing things, and a lot of times I see repeating patterns. I see like geometries, but they're not, they're like continuously morphing. Sometimes I can see like a toroidal field from the side. So it's
Mhm.
got that kind of shape where you can see it like skinny in the middle. And there are like these colors and shapes that are all going into it. And then it's coming down around and it's turning two different ways and coming up from the bottom as well. And it kind of looks like a tree in a way with the
Mhm.
roots to it. So but it's very almost psychedelic in how like busy all of the, it's not
Mhm.
just like I get a chance to be like, "Oh, let me just stare at wonder at this stationary object and really take it in and see," it's like, God, there's so much happening and so much moving. And it's like, and if I just change my perspective a little bit, then I see it from a different way or it goes away and changes into something else. And so, but there was one time that I was, in fact, I think this has happened more than once, but one time that really sticks out, and you may have gotten to this part in the book, but it's toward the end, I think, that I write about it. But one time I saw this like reptilian looking head that had these like, there were scales for sure. There were really sharp teeth. There was like the slit eye, eyeball type of thing. And it looked fierce and it was taking up all my inner vision. Like that's all I could see was this like scaly creature. But because I recognize the subjectivity of my experience and I have traversed enough to be like, okay, if I bring my focus to another location within my brain, there are a lot of different ways that I play around with it where it's like, okay, where is my point of focus right now in my brain? What happens if I move it to or let me move it to a different quadrant. How does it change things? Or I can like literally feel where my presence is. And okay, if I lift up a little bit from an awareness perspective and I just like change my location, things change. What I see changes, it all changes. So, and like I was saying with when I'm seeing like more of the chaotic, like shapes and everything, I can see like some kind of shape in it, but sometimes I don't want it to change, but I
Hmm.
do something, I involuntarily change something and it changes. And so I was like, okay, well, I can change this. Oh, I can get attached to this and say, oh my God, there's a reptilian. What does this mean? Am I a reptilian or am I under attack or is this a demon? And all those thoughts kind of went through my head where I was like, should I be scared about this? Did I like breach something that is not in my highest good? But then I tried to stay open and curious about it. And I was like, this could be a test. Like this could be a guardian. This could be a gatekeeper. This could
Hmm.
be a being that is there to make sure that I'm ready. Oh my gosh, we have a kitty cat. I love
Yeah.
kitties.
It's
Well, he's
Yeah.
got
so
a mustache.
I
she
have
wanted attention, so sorry.
Oh, I
that
love
black
her.
on the pillow is
Oh, more
one.
kitties.
Yeah, I have four
Oh,
cats.
you do? Lucky. I have two.
We are a pro kitty channel, so
Yay. Good. Well, I'm
Yeah.
glad they're making an appearance. But, I wonder too about as we're traversing these realms of consciousness, I believe that we have gatekeepers there. And it's not necessarily like, do you have the right? Are you worthy? But it's really a like, to get through this, it's another energy. It's another, and like you may freak out. If you get through this, you may freak out if you're not ready. So
Hmm.
let's just see. So I was like, it could be one of my own guides who's like, all right, let me put this costume on. Let me
Hmm.
get the reptilian head on. Let's see what she does because I don't want her getting over here and getting in too deep, because
Yeah.
she's not ready for this. So there were all those like options. And it was like, I'm going to choose how I feel about this. And I'm going to just assume that this is for my highest good and that I am protected and that, that it's okay. And it was okay. I don't have a lot of interactions where I like see a being and then they give me direction or they tell me insights. I have had some of the things like you were talking about, Daniel, where, I get insights, but it doesn't feel like somebody's giving them to me. It just feels like all of a sudden I have all these solutions that start pouring in and they're multi-leveled, multifaceted, and they're like genius. Where I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like a masterpiece. I could have sat here for the whole week and dedicated my time to
Hmm.
picking this problem apart and how I can hit it from all these beautiful levels. And I don't know that I could have come up with this, but I don't feel that there is, or I don't perceive the intelligence as an external being that's sharing
No.
that. So I say that because if I was getting direction or advice or like ego stroking from this being or any being, I would maybe, not be so open to like, okay, let's just see what this is.
yeah.
I don't want to like fall into delusion of, trusting too much something that I'm not really sure about.
Right.
Some sort of interdimensional intelligence that I'm only speculating about the motives.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of when I was in remote viewing, when I was deconstructing from being evangelical. I still had very much a black and white perspective of things. So when I was in the liminal space, like the astral space of trying to get information, I'd run into a lot of like dark entities or other things. But as I started kind of deconstructing, being like, wait, there's more of a gray like nuances to these elements. I didn't run into it as nearly as much. So I think
Mm.
it definitely is subjective, but at the same time, so there is a gentleman I came across back then too. His name's Damien Ickles. His name. He's high magic practitioner on YouTube. He was in jail for like over 25 years for false, him and a group of kids were falsely accused of murdering another kid. And then he went away for a long time. He eventually served his time and got out. And oh yeah, by the way, he's innocent. He went through a lot of processes. He's like, I almost died in prison multiple times. I got stabbed, all this other stuff, but really helped him hone into practicing high magic. And so he said one of the times he was doing his YouTube videos talking about how high magic works, he said, everything that is external to you is also an internal reflection. So he said, anything that is kind of abstract, it also is real. Everything is real in that sense, right? We're all connected to the universe is connected to us. So there is an element of, yes, it's real, but also you are the driver, and making sure you keep yourself centered in that. And that's what a lot of magic practitioners do, especially people that are in the occult as well. There's even people that work with demonology, right, are using demon magic. And they said one of the main dangers of going into that when you don't know what you're doing is that the demonic entities that you're interacting with in that particular practice, they are technically a reflection of the darker aspects of your psyche. So if you do not have those building blocks in place, it can turn your whole life into chaos because you're facing those subconscious elements that you naturally hide away from yourself, right? Your ego is protecting you. So, I think when a lot of people come into this space, especially new age spirituality, maybe they don't have these building blocks I think this is where we turn in, you were saying about worrying about slipping into a psychosis. And this is where a lot of people kind of run that risk. And so, yeah, I think you're really wise for keeping that nuance and also skepticism, but being open at the same time. For that process for you, how long did it take for you to really start getting into that where you're just wanting to be neutral in general when you're in that space? Yeah. Is that something that started out for you? Did you have to learn by trial and error, or how did that work?
I relate to what you're talking about with the black and white because earlier in my journey, I was is it this or is it this? Is it my imagination or is something really happening? Am I making this up? Or is this real? And I had to really soften that. And I continue to soften that. I catch myself doing that still, but in that softening, and I've tried to soften myself in a lot of ways. I used to be very politically minded, and I really felt that the other side was my enemy and that was the problem. And if I could just get everybody else to see where they're wrong, and it's been a while since.
And they're going to turn around. They're going to be all in the right.
That's right. Yes, exactly. Because I've figured it out. So they're all wrong. So this has happened in a lot of ways in my life where I really make the choice to stay open and to stay in more of that third thing, where it's like it's not black and white. Learning more just about the illusion of reality, the illusion of the reality that we're in, the construct that we're in, and going deeper into that has helped too, because it's kind of like, is any of this real? I don't know. And the shadow part, I love that you brought up the shadow part because that was another thing when I was seeing this reptilian, I was like, is this me? Like, is this a part of me? Is this something that I'm holding, I'm carrying around? I can't see it. And so all of it goes together, and I think it's just kind of part of my signature where I am skeptical to an extent, but I also don't want to be closed, where it's like, nope, nothing, so I don't necessarily assume that even the experiences that I have that are subjective, there are things that I want it to be. There are things that I think are likely, and there are things that I'm like, and I could be misunderstanding it too. I could be missing a piece of this here, because our human brains really, I see them as filters, and that there's so much, like Christian, you were talking about how the universe is so vast. And that it can be mind-blowing, like that just how infinite the possibilities are. But our human brain is designed in such a way that, it is dual typically, but it's also designed to filter our experience in a certain way. And it shuts out like a huge portion of the real reality by design. And so I'm aware of that. And I know that my brain works that way too. So I know at any given point that there are things that I could be missing. And some things I recognize later, like much later, where or there might be new information that comes in that relates, like the things even in this conversation has been so exciting for me because you've taught me things that relate back to experiences that I've had that I didn't even know were things, where I'm just kind of going through my life like, well, this is what happened to me, but I don't know. And then you guys are like, well, that's a thing. So sometimes things do come to me kind of retroactively, and then I can apply it to like, oh my gosh, that makes me think about something that I experienced that I didn't think about in that way. So it's a journey, right?
Yeah.
Really is.
And I did read a part of your book too, where you were talking about how you get and receive these insights, like the insights you were talking about earlier, where I've had exactly what you're talking about. That's the best way I can describe it. Even in times where I'm talking to someone because I'm giving them the insight that I've received, oftentimes I would refer to it as they, because it's like in my head, I'm like, there's no way like I would have come up with that. Like, where is this coming from? But it's like a sure thing. Like I know 100%, like I don't know where it's coming from, but I have to roll with it kind of thing. And, even when I was talking to someone once, I was just like, they're showing me you asking maybe about a week or so ago that you were literally out loud asking for help. Is that true? And then she would be like, yeah, like, how did you know that? And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just, but that's what I feel like, how it feels when that intuition kind of like comes in, that insight comes in. So like when you wrote about that in your book, I like really resonated with me. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Universally, that's a universal thing that I think happens. A lot of people is just tuning into that frequency. That was a big thing that in the evangelical space was doing signs and wonders and walking up to people, and you get a word of knowledge, they call it in the evangelical space. And it was kind of the same thing where you'd be like, "This, I see a red tree with you under it, and a swing set. Is that like, oh yeah, that was me when I was 10 years old. How do you know?" That was kind of our witnessing, right? And I think that when you eagle view expand out to different people's perspectives, it's more of a universal thing. It's not really because you figured out the secret in that particular sect. It's that you're flowing, you're in alignment of getting information with the universe.
Higher yourself.
Higher yourself, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just weird when that occurs. And those are like, I've been trying to recognize what it feels like during those moments, because I know there are people out there that can just turn it on and it just, it's natural. And I think that what is an on and off thing for me and for some other people, that over time, this is going to be like the new normal, like how we start to reconnect with our higher selves, intuition, what we call supernatural will become more natural because now we know how the world operates, because we're constantly growing. We're starting to see it now, like with people talking about this stuff, near-death experiences, abductees, and like, and we didn't even talk about that yet, but like how like some abductees are saying things that near-death experiences are sharing about the universe. And it's just like it just looks like a big circle, right? Where everything connects in this way. And I
Right.
think, things like, telepathy and whatever you want to call it, it's going to be where we're headed, I guess.
Right. Well, and I
More
think
emotional.
too, yeah, and I think that that's a big part of the ET experience for a lot of people is
Mm,
the telepathic nature. That's how it's felt for me predominantly,
mm,
where and again, like I don't have a necessarily like a great glean on who the beings are, what their names are, where they're from necessarily. I had different readings who have suggested different, and there's commonalities there amongst different people who pick up on star origins and things like that. But so much of it seems to be like a telepathic thing. I had an experience not too long ago where I was in that liminal space and I really felt like there were 3 beings with me. Like, it felt and as much as I love this topic and I'm the type of person that's looking at the sky a lot, like, okay, where are you? Come on. I want to see it. Felt it really strongly and I had my eyes closed and I was like, I feel like if I open my eyes, I'm going to see him. And then I was like, do I want to see him? Like, am I going to freak out? Am I ready for that? Even though if you ask me, 99 times out of 100, I'll be like, I want to see him, but it was this like, I don't know. I don't know. Like, cause it felt so real. And then I did finally open my eyes and I didn't see them, but it was that type of thing where I was like, there definitely felt like there was some sort of telepathic component to it because the presence was there.
Hmm.
And, sometimes I can adjust. I don't know if I'm curious if you guys have this experience where like you can be looking with your eyes open at something like at a wall or something and just keep changing your focus and kind
Yeah,
of seeing the space in between and maybe making out some patterns or something, but in the kind of staticky
like making it
visual.
blurry, make your vision blurry kind of ability.
Right. And there's some times where I can like be doing that and the shapes can like I'll start to see shapes as though, as though I'm in that, the experiences that I've told you before. There are times where I've had my eyes open and I'm like, I can see corridors. I can see like, and that made me wonder, like, is part of me, is my human brain now picking up on me being somewhere else where there is like a corridor because it seemed like I could start to see these lines that looked like
Hmm.
a corridor and some different things that just suggested, some parameters that weren't there in the physical. So again, like maybe a telepathic connection even with another part of myself. So there's the telepathy amongst us in the physical realm. And I came across this thing yesterday that talked about this CIA guy from, I want to say the 70s. And he just on a lark, for a laugh, thought that because he'd do lie detector tests on people. That was one of his tools that he would use. And he just wanted to hook his plant up for it to a lie detector. And he was amazed at that he started to see responses within it. So he started doing these, and I need to look into this because I saw it on Instagram and I was like, I need to research this to see if this is true because I'm purely going off of a carousel in Instagram. But he started doing things like, threatening it to, like, I'm going to cut your
Oh yeah,
leaf. And then it would have a fear
sense
response.
intention. Yeah.
Right, and then he would he started like it became his passion, and he would do things like, kind of like hurt another plant and see what the plant would do, and it would have this spike in it was afraid, the way and it was responding in a similar way that a person would be afraid. But then, like, if it was given a loving experience, it would respond in a human way, or like an emotional way that he sees with the way humans respond. Certain people would enter the room and it would have a positive response. He kept one in a dark room and didn't give it any connection and saw it doing so all these different things. And it was like, plants are telepathic. And, I think that almost is like rational, like, of course they're telepathic, but
Hmm.
then that also assumes that you accept that plants have intelligence and consciousness. But that kind of thing also, it's like, yeah, the telepathy amongst us as humans, but then the telepathy of other parts of our consciousness that might be in what we would consider other locations, beings, interdimensional beings, extra dimensional beings, ET beings, however we want to think about that. But even like plants and animals, like your
Hmm.
kitties and, all of these things that I think we're understanding more and more like, wow, we have a lot of capabilities that we're not tapping into.
It's interesting too because a lot of people in near-death experiences will talk about being in, not everyone, but a lot of people will like wake up, on the other side and there is grass or trees, but they're able to connect with the grass or trees and they're like, oh, they're alive too. And I can communicate with them. And it's just kind of like the filter that we have here while on Earth is like shut off, and now you're free and you can really feel the connection. There's no separation really,
Right.
which is interesting.
Yeah, I think with us being humans and having to eat and do all the different things there. You were talking about earlier of you had mentioned human brain is
Filter.
a filter. I'm not sure if we'd be able to deal with the fact that every single little thing is intelligent, and that no matter what we do, we have to kill and process and intake, and I think that's maybe part of the reason why we don't really think about that, or we don't really doesn't really come to mind. But yeah, I've experienced one experience I had was an altered state, and Sophie, my cat, came and sat on my chest, which she usually does. I remember getting the sense where it popped in my head. I was not thinking of this, so I would attribute that to her. We were, I know, Chris, you always like this one, where the mental picture I got was heavy metal movie, like from the 1980s, like style artwork. And we're both on motorcycles driving through the desert. And she was in like full body, and she's driving this like hog motorcycle with a red bandana around her, like all cool, like,
Like a humanoid feline?
yeah, like a humanoid feline, and both me and her are riding, and we're like, duh, and like probably having metal music blasting or some, rock stuff. Like that was the image that came into my mind. I started laughing and laughing, and then weeks later, she was constantly wanting to go outside, like scratch at the door, and I was like, I think she wants to go on an adventure with us. Probably what she was trying to communicate. And sure enough, we put her in a little stroller, took her out, and she was just happy as can be. And yeah, but I definitely believe it. I think everything is alive, and we are all connected in that regard, right? And that also reflects with near-death experiencers and out-of-body experiences as well. Everything is intrinsically conscious, and we are just a form of expression that we can do this human experience, and we're fairly intelligent. We have a range of emotions, but also we have a lot of filters. Also, wanted to mention one thing that I remember from Jeff Silver, the experiencer I mentioned earlier. One of his encounters with the gray, she said, stop looking with your human monkey eyes. And,
monkey eyes.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think we assume what we see and what we sense is how reality works, but I think it's very much filtered, and it's part of the process as we're talking about these subjects, because we're, at the end of the day, it's science that we don't understand. The phenomenon is science we don't understand. It's how reality works. And these beings understand how the universe works a lot better than we do. So I think when we have these extra human experiences, these personal experiences we have, where you have that dream when you were a child that was more real than real, but it was a dream, but somehow you remember it 40 years later. Those are examples of these other forms of reality. Ever been in a liminal space or other strange, things? One dream that stands out to me that happened about 8 months ago was I remember being I was an orb floating through a swampy area, and I was outside of a craft. A craft was landed, and I was not my body. I was an orb, and people talk about orbs all the time. And, I think that they are them, but also they're a lot more complex than we give them credit for. And we know plenty of experiencers that have had memories of being beside a craft, and then they are turned into an orb and they float into the craft, or a gray version of them walks out of their body into the craft. We also have people that have experienced meeting. So Susie Hansen, we interviewed her, amazing woman. We're good friends with her. She described in her book, The Dual Soul Connection, that one of the memories that she had was she was younger. Gray came into the room. It was, she was on a craft, asked her if she would play with this orb, this soul. And so when the orb floated in, she started crying and laughing and was extremely confused by the experience. But she said at a later memory that they told her, the reason why we wanted you to play with that orb was that is your future son, and we need you to have a connection that is important for this assignment you've signed up with. And so the Greys had her future son she had not yet given birth to on this craft. That is very, 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 very strange. So when it comes to the levels of what we're dealing with, I really think that we're grasping at straws and we're doing our best to understand what it is. Um, and I hope that as we move forward, trying to unpack our personal experiences, trying to unpack what disclosure process looks like, unpack how does spirituality, how is it going to evolve as we come to these realizations, or even going, maybe people get scared and they want to go back into religion, or, I want to go back into my box. What is that going to look like for everyone? You know?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It'll be really interesting. It's like putting the toothpaste back in the tube, right?
Right.
Like,
It really is.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
I have been thinking more and more like, because my work is spiritual work, working with people on the spiritual level and really wanting to open them up more to the true nature of their opportunity here on the planet. And but I've been very like, in the years that I've been a meditation teacher, a spiritual teacher, I do try to, again, I've got that neutrality kind of signature, and I try not to make people try to push people into something that they're not ready for. If they're not interested in spirituality, I'm not there to sell it to them. It's like, if you're ready and you're interested, I'm here for you. But things are moving so fast right now that I feel within myself this, like, I really think it's becoming more and more important that people are nurturing that reality that they are a spirit. We have this deprivation in our modern living that, I know with your podcast, most people who listen to this, they've got a more expanded view, but across the board, it's still a lot of people don't have exposure to that reality that they are an orb. They are a spirit. They
Mhm.
have a body, but they are a spirit, and that's the truth of who they are. And I think that's going to be so critical for navigating the changes that we're in and that are coming, because we can't put the toothpaste back in the bottle. Are in the tube. We, yeah, we can fall back into a traditional religion if that feels comfortable for us, but we can't unknow what we're learning. And to do that from a completely materialistic perspective, from a completely physical orientation of what is real is my body and my thoughts and maybe my emotions. Maybe I can like bring my emotions into this and like think about how they affect things, but a lot of people aren't even there. They're caught in their thoughts. They're looping their thoughts. They're caught in the physical, and they have no frame of reference to navigate this. And it's so different. What I feel strongly that what is coming, what is here, is so different than how we've been living. And it requires a different way of understanding life. And so I really, feel more and more sort of like, okay, I've been very, and this is really new for me. So I mean, I'm not going to be going and trying to shove things down anybody's throats because, I just don't think that that's fruitful.
Right.
But I do want to keep to begin sort of pushing a little bit of like, it's time now. It is time to start relating to yourself in a different way and nurturing that part of yourself, awakening it, connecting it so that you can navigate this, because it can be really tricky territory when you have no frame of reference. I know you
Yeah.
both know that,
It, yeah. What would you give for people coming into the space that are newer? What advice would you give to them for not getting overwhelmed, but also not slipping into spiritual psychosis?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's so different for different people. If they don't have really any frame of reference, for me, I'm always going to first recommend meditation, but that, oh my God. Oh my God. That, I love it. I love it.
I have a toy and I'm trying to keep them preoccupied. With
Well,
doing
you
this.
talk about holding that neutrality. You're just like, it's happening, but maybe they won't notice. If
Yeah.
you're listening to the audio, we just had this cat that just appeared out of nowhere on his shoulders, and that was awesome. Um, so, but for me, meditation is critical, and it's been such an important part of my path. There are a lot of people who think that they can't meditate, and I would say that everybody thinks that when they haven't tried it or when they've only tried it a little bit, and that we can all learn meditation. But if that does feel like too big of a chunk, spend more time in nature and like really let yourself disconnect from technology, go out in nature. There is so much that happens with our nervous system, even that what happens with our brains, because I'm very into sacred geometry also. And again, if somebody's really kind of new on their path, they will probably not know that word, and we don't really have time for that right now. But we're trying to wrap up here. But sacred geometry is this foundation of the reality. It's the foundation of reality, and it is in the natural world. So I like to draw it. I like to look at it. I like to color it. I like to meditate with it. But when I go out into nature, I'm like, oh my gosh, the phi ratio is everywhere. The Fibonacci sequence, however you look at that, it's kind of the similar things. It's everywhere. I've got this like seashell that happens to be here. And, this is the phi ratio. It's built upon the Fibonacci sequence. We see it in like the patterns of leaves and how flowers grow. And what's that?
And galaxies too.
In galaxies, absolutely. In our human anatomy, it is everywhere. So on a subconscious level, you don't even have to know about sacred geometry. You don't have to necessarily study. I think you get a lot from it, but just being in nature, you're like reorienting your brain, your consciousness, your energy fields are being naturally reoriented to the structure of true organic life here on this planet. And we're really not getting enough. A lot of people really aren't getting enough of that. And that can be an easy way to start to reconnect.
Acts as a grounding agent for people. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's kind of like when common thing with activism, people are like, make sure you get involved with something so that you don't slip into depression, because you need to be putting your work, making your hands busy and actually be a part of something that helps us just innately as humans. That's some great advice. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And I plan to finish your book because I actually am really enjoying it. And there's a portion of it that actually helped me have a new perspective with something I'm going through. So I do, for the audience watching, recommend Your Authentic Awakening. You do a really good job at breaking down like a lot of these aspects, because I know that, how we were just talking about how people may not understand what's coming, but I feel like eventually when that time comes, people are going to turn to people like you or you, Daniel, or me. And I've even had my mom start asking me questions about this kind of stuff, so I feel like you do a good job of, helping people to understand like the principles like higher and concepts like higher consciousness, higher self, and vibration, frequency, breaking all that stuff down, because it's kind of like the framework that everything else is built on, because it is a lot. Like, we talk about this stuff like it's normal, but for me, I don't know about you guys, it took me years to get here, but yeah.
Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. And where can our guests or audience find you?
So karagoodwin.com, that is with a K. And that has you can find out about my book. You can get the book that way, or it's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all of that normal stuff. And I have a Learn to Meditate class, or a Learn to Meditate course on there that's self-paced. So if people are interested in meditation, that's a great resource to be able to do it in your own time. And it's kind of bite-sized, digestible steps so that are spread out over 21 days. And I have a community where we get together and meditate once or twice a week and have just talks and connect and talk about things from a spiritual perspective. And then all my podcast episodes are at soulelevationpodcast.com.
Again, I'll put that up on the screen here for everyone to see. And I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and reaching out to us. We value your time and we value what you have to share with everyone. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. It's really been such a fun discussion. I've learned so much, and I'm really, really grateful for you guys hosting this beautiful space right now and in all of the beautiful episodes that you're creating.
Thank you, Kara. Thank you so much for reaching out to us and coming on the show. And yeah, really appreciate you being here with us and continuing the conversation forward.
And that's all for now, guys. If you enjoy this episode, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss out on an episode. And we hope to have you back, Kara.
I would love it. Thank you.
Take care.
of our healthcare system. 0.